Hey everyone, I think we are now live. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what I would say, tons of screens open up here. I would say is my biggest peeve whenever I was working for one nonprofit. And now that I work with lots of nonprofits on a monthly basis, I would say it's probably the area that's the most time consuming, the most frustrating for most nonprofits that we work with. And this is either like employee reimbursements, whether it or expenses, right, that employees are charging. And I have managed to lose my slide. So give me 1 second. So we're going to be talking about that today. We're going to be talking about how to keep track of all of these expenses. How do we do it in an easier way? And this is an area where oftentimes we are able to make it paperless. We're able to use technology. We're able to make things a lot easier on ourselves. So that's kind of my goal today. But one thing to note, we go over one topic on these, but the intention is for the topics to be fairly brief, just to give you some ideas, some tips, tricks, hacks that we use at the Charity CFO. To do like certain processes or how to handle functions of the accounting system that's really kind of a pain in the neck. But this is also intended to be an open forum. So if there's anyone that has any other questions, whether it's related to this topic or it's not, feel free to drop that in the Q&A and we can certainly answer any of those questions, whether it's about your nonprofit. I may not always have all of the answers, but if it's about your organization as a whole, or it's about specific financial management, or other areas of the business that you might need help on, let me know. Real brief intro, my name is Tasha Anderson. I'm the founder and CEO of this firm. It's called the Charity CFO. I started this firm, interestingly enough, 5.5 years ago with the plan that I was just going to work part-time for a couple nonprofits. My background, I did 7 years as an auditor. So everything I talk about is through that auditing lens. And then after I did that, I worked for a nonprofit as their CFO for several years. I realized though, when I was at that organization, which really kind of pertains to the topic today, that a lot of these positions have many, many hats that they wear. And one of the things that I figured out was how to get the accounting down to the least amount of time and energy as effort. Not because I was some sort of accounting rocket science like superstar or anything like that. It was more so because I had responsibility for a lot of other things too. And I needed to figure out a way to get the accounting down with the least amount of time as possible. So interestingly enough, I learned quite a few things on how to keep things audit friendly, funder happy, more importantly though, administratively efficient. So I decided after a few years in that role that I was going to step away from working for a nonprofit in that way. And my hope was to lend the tips, tricks, and hacks, I call it like tips for survival. Again, it's great that it's in good practices, it's audit friendly, it's efficient, but really more just for our mental capacity and really streamlining the things that we do. I really try to find ways to make the administrative functions of the nonprofit businesses much more efficient. And we do that. That's basically what the whole firm is now. We figure out ways to do accounting. It's incredible. I've worked with nonprofits that used to take, 2 full-time employees, and we've gotten it down to like 20 hours a week worth of work, right? So it's significant like process improvement. But to do that, I lend a lot on the use of technology and systems and processes and those sort of things. So that's sometimes what I like to share on these calls with you all. So that you get a chance to kind of know what it is that we do. And listen, none of what we do is proprietary. It means we don't own the software. We don't, it's not a secret, but sometimes I found, at least for me, my experience, when I worked for a nonprofit, I really struggled to have the time to research better solutions. Once I even identified a better solution, I lacked the time to actually do the implementation, or even if it wasn't going to take a long time to do the implementation, some of the issues were around, okay, what are the unintended consequences? Because, rolling out new technology always has little unintended consequences. If that's the case, how am I going to fix this and fix it quickly in a way that I can get my financial reporting out and everything to be good? So That for me was the biggest reason why I never really pushed to roll out new changes in my accounting function. And I'm sure many of you all are in that same space, or your accountant may be reluctant to roll out changes because we just don't know what Pandora's box we're opening. So today, like I said, we're going to talk about employee reimbursements. But if there's any additional questions once I get through this, it's just a handful of slides. I want to keep it as high level as possible. I just want to share some options and some ideas for how I see other nonprofits. I think we're up to about 108 nonprofits we work with on a monthly basis. So everybody does things a little bit differently. And I wanted to show you a couple examples of how other nonprofits are doing it. So let me go ahead and share my screen here and we will get going on this. Okay, so we're talking about employee reimbursements, but I actually decided as I was kind of putting this presentation together this morning that I wanted to also talk about just credit card transactions in general. So really these are the expenses that employees are charging on their kind of on an individual basis, and then looking for either reimbursement from the organization or the organization is lending some sort of corporate credit card or something like that. So that's going to be more of the topic. I kind of decided to expand it. So what I see, there's actually a few different processes that, nonprofits are typically taking here. One is like the traditional way. There's a manual form, and by manual, it might just be a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet or something like that, that is populated. It's like printed out. There's attached, the receipts to it, to your credit card, whether it's your personal card or the corporate card. You circulate it for the appropriate individuals that need to approve it, and then you give it to your accountant, and they process the accounts payable. Usually, the accounts payable will then get you a paper check, and then we'll give it to the employee. Usually because it's not a ton of money. Oftentimes in my experience, the employee ends up misplacing that check, and then the accountant has to go back, avoid the check and reissue the check or some variation of that. So the other option is electronic payment. This is actually what we do with a lot of our clients. We keep everything is kind of on an electronic platform. Well, we actually use a combination of number one and bullet number 2 and bullet number 4 there. Other people will use kind of trying to eliminate the paper checks, right? And look for more of an online system, like paperless. The second one is electronic payments using an online bill pay platform. We like bill.com. You can probably use some other options, but basically we use some sort of manual form, Excel spreadsheet or otherwise. We usually scan that or put it in some sort of digital format, save it as a PDF or something, scan the receipts in to attach it to that PDF, and then email the whole reimbursement to bill.com. Now, when I say reimbursement, again, same process, whether it's for their credit card transactions, or meaning on a corporate credit card, or it's employee reimbursements on their own personal stuff. Then we would tag the supervisor and this software. The software again is called bill.com. The supervisor then reviews all the documentation to make sure that it's appropriate, and then that person would approve the bill. Only after it's approved, the process, a payment is processed to the employee. Through bill.com, you can actually do an ACH to the employee, so you never have to worry about missing checks. That's my preference. Or you can have bill.com send the employee a check for that. That's how we basically handle it through all of our clients. We process it through bill.com. Payroll is another way. This is how it used to be when I worked at a nonprofit. We put everything through payroll. Employees like getting things directly deposited so they don't have to lose the checks. So you could do that through bill.com. It's a similar platform. Payroll has its advantages and disadvantages, but it's a very similar process. But rather than sending the payment documentation to your accountant, you typically send it to the person that's processing payroll, which might be HR. Payment is then processed through payroll. I will tell you from an accounting perspective why I don't like the payroll process. Yes, it's efficient for getting direct deposit to the employees, but one of the problems is that oftentimes with a payroll system, it's so consolidated on the ways that you can code those expenses that sometimes it'll go into one account and you'll get the payroll report and it'll just say like expense reimbursements, and it'll have one line item and it will have all of the different transactions thrown into that one line item. And so from an accounting perspective, it's challenging to differentiate between what is mileage, what is office supplies, what's program supplies, what are all those different types of expenses. And that just creates a whole nother separate step. So which then accounting then still has to go back and look at the individual receipts to differentiate what type of expenses. So for me, it's actually a little bit more work from the accounting perspective to track that, unless your payroll is set up the right way and you have multiple different codes for all the different type of expenses. And sometimes that's just a lot to try to do. You could have conferences in there, you could have airline travel, you could have accommodations, you could have all the different types of supplies. So you can imagine with all of the different employees, how many different options you need within payroll. So for that reason, that's usually kind of my least favorite, but it is convenient to get your employees a direct deposit. The last and my personal favorite, because I like to joke, we're actually, I mean, our website says we do accounting for nonprofits, but I like to joke that we're actually an IT company that happens to do accounting for nonprofits. Because we use a lot of technology. And we're going to talk about some of my favorite platforms here in a little bit, in case you all are interested in kind of modernizing this process for you. But basically, with these options, employees track and scan their expenses automatically. So as the transactions are happening, they're uploading their receipts in real time. They get supervisor approval. With some platforms, you can get that at the end of the month or the end of the week or whatever duration you choose, or on a transaction by transaction basis. So whether that expense reimbursement is done on an individual, like personal card, or on a corporate card, you can get supervisor approval depending on the platform, either way, which is supervisor approval, of course, it goes without saying, is always important for those audit purposes, right? Whether it's a funder is coming in and reviewing your files, or you have an independent CPA that comes in and reviews your work, the approvals are always important. And then the accounting personnel can just pull the reports and cut the checks or process the payments right away, whether, again, if it's on a weekly basis or it's on a monthly basis. Totally up to you. So that's with the software. So speaking of software, when you're kind of considering whether you want to launch a software or what software you're looking at, I just wrote down some key considerations we look at when we are thinking about launching a different process for our new clients, right? Number one, what type of expenses are we tracking? Are we tracking predominantly mileage? Because that could be a totally different platform. Is it all different sorts of expenses the employees are incurring on our behalf? What level of approval are we looking for? So do we need multiple layers of approval? Do we not care about approval? Is it just as long as they spend within their budget, they don't need approval? What does that look like? Also figuring out, are these on a corporate card? Are you issuing corporate credit cards to the employees, or are the employees getting reimbursed for these expenses? That there's different platforms that are a little bit more user-friendly to the corporate credit card side, which people really like. And then, of course, are you looking for a paper or a paperless solution? Look, even though post-COVID, even though a lot of people have moved to a paperless or wanting to move to paperless systems, there are still a lot of people that prefer paper processes. So kind of think in that way. Of course, the software solution is going to be paperless, so that may or may not work for you. But some of the solutions that I like, and there's several out there that you can use. I know QuickBooks has some kind of variation of it. I did not put Bill.com on here. And the reason why, these solutions are specifically for uploading transactions as they are incurred. So every single time there's an expense charge, an employee would accept ownership for that, and they would upload the appropriate documentation as they go along. So there's some other platforms that you can use in conjunction with a more manual process. But this is if you wanted to go all in, completely paperless, and you want the employees to upload their documentation. These would be some good platforms to use. Expensify, you've all probably heard of that, pretty popular. And Dext, formerly known as Receipt Bank. We use Receipt Bank for substantially all of our clients. I'll go over that a little bit more why. And then there's another unique situation, not exactly like these two, but it gets you to the same result. It's called Divi. Divi is actually owned by Bill.com now, I believe. So we'll talk about those and kind of the pros and the cons for each one of them here in a sec. All right, so first let's talk about Expensify. I actually have inherited a few nonprofit clients that already use Expensify. They've been really happy with it. Like anything though, these all come with a cost. So you do have to know that there are costs associated with these. So some of the reasons why people like Expensify, first and foremost, you can basically link your credit card feed. So whatever the transactions are coming through, you can link that into Expensify and your staff can actually see, oh yes, I charged these 4 expenses this week. I need to upload and attach the receipts to each individual transaction. You can also have approval on a transaction basis with Expensify. So if you are a supervisor and you want to make sure that you're monitoring as things are coming through the credit card account, you are approving those. Obviously, the expenses are already done, but it at least allows you to shut the card down or to have conversations kind of proactively rather than waiting until the month-end statement comes around and then you're, of course, surprised. It integrates really nicely with accounting and other travel software for mileage and those sort of things. Of course, because of the approval process and the ability to attach documentation to it, very audit friendly. You also can just take your smartphone and you can do this with basically all the platforms rather than having to worry about getting back to the office, scanning your receipts, uploading your receipts. Each one of them have an app where you can just take a picture and it uploads and attaches right into the transaction. So it's really easy for your accountant to kind of see what the nature of those are. Of course, it's paperless, so people really like that. And another really cool benefit of Expensify that's unique from the other platforms that I'll show you today, that Expensify, your accountant can actually go into Expensify, see, for example, if they're personal reimbursements that your employees need to get paid back for, they can actually cut a payment out of Expensify and just pay the employee right away, right out of that system. That way you don't have to then download a report and then route it for approval and then send it to your accountant. And then your accountant has to enter it into QuickBooks or whatever system you have. And then they have to cut a check and then they have to mail it. All of that is like a couple buttons, they click and Expensify and then the employees are paid right away. So way easier, probably for the best features, I would say, for any particular nonprofit that's keeping their stuff, their accounting in-house, they have their own bookkeeper in-house. This is probably the best platform because it's kind of a one-stop shop and it really allows employees to see what their transactions are. Now, I will say, and we'll talk about this in a little bit later, I have a few more pro tips, but to the degree that you can have, if you have corporate credit cards, to the degree that you can have separately issued credit cards for each individual person that would be charging, that's ideal because then you can link up their accounts to their individual card. When you have one card and it's shared amongst a group of people, I have issues with that anyway, but it's really difficult for people to be able to identify which charges are theirs. So kind of look at what your bank and how they set those up. Sometimes some banks will group all the credit cards into one account. That said, even despite that, they can still pull out their individual transactions. Worst case scenario, you don't have to link up the credit card bank feed, meaning you don't have to pull in those. Some people just really like that feature because it's just a double check in case they forgot any charges that hit that credit card, like software subscription and things like that. Next is Dex. This is personally what we use. I like Dex for a couple different reasons and because we have a little bit of a different business model, right? We are outsourced accounting functions and we not only get credit card receipts from our clients, but we get a lot of other things, basically any other documentation to substantiate revenues or expenses. So we kind of use this as a virtual inbox, and Dex is much more than just credit card tracking, but it certainly does that well too. You can import the transactions again, personal or business. It also has different layers of approval. Now, typically that's not on a transaction basis. Within Dex, you would create an expense reimbursement report by selecting the various expenses you want to include on that report. And then you can download that and send it to your, or you can tag your supervisor for approval there. Again, it's audit friendly. It's one-click receipt scanning, same as Receipt Bank. Of course, it's paperless. One thing you cannot do though, you cannot pay directly out of Dex. You can't pay your employees there. So therefore, you would have to get that report from your, after it's been approved by the supervisor, you'd have to get each individual employee's report. Then you would send that to your accountant for payment. So either manually if they still issue checks, or what we do, we have all of our clients build expense reimbursements in Dex, and then they would send them to bill.com for payment, right? That's how we handle that. Or if it's a company issue credit card, we we'll just look and see what transactions are hitting the corporate credit card and matching that with what's actually hitting the bank account. It could go both ways. You can use it both ways. So Dex is what we use. Again, I would probably, for any of you that's not working with me and you were doing it completely on your own, I would probably go with Expensify. I like Dex though for us because we like to keep the credit card processing separate than the bill pay processing, because we use, again, Dex is an inbox. So some stuff is just random documents they're sending to me, and then receipts that come through there. We know those receipts have already been paid. We use bill.com for a little bit different. So that's something different. And then a totally different platform, although it accomplishes the same thing, but I think it's really cool. Divi, it's actually not, it actually serves as a credit card. So they give you a line of credit, right? And for those of you that have struggled getting lines of credit for your nonprofit, this is something to think about, but they basically give you a line of credit and they can issue as many credit cards as you need. And you give those to your employees to use as a credit card, and then they charge on that line of credit, and then Divi will take the money out of the bank account, right? Replenish it, and then you pay it and they replenish it. And it's pretty cool. One thing that I really, really like about it though, is that it integrates really nicely, again, with accounting software. It's audit friendly, paperless. But what's really cool, in the same way, the employees will upload their receipts. They can tag which code. This is the same for all of the platforms, by the way. The employees upload their receipts. They can tag each individual account or class or department or codes or any other codes, or leave notes as to the nature of the expenses and those sort of things. And it's totally paperless. Like I said, because Divi automatically drafts your bank account, depending, I think it's like on a weekly basis, you charge the money, they debit it from your account. There's no need for additional payments, and your employees can just use it as a credit card. One other thing I really like about Divi is it has a budget tool. Basically, you get to limit your employee usage by either certain line items, like you give them a budget, and then you can actually say, maybe it's, different intervals, maybe it's because of a grant or otherwise, I'm adding $500 to your card and it goes to program supplies for this particular grant. So that when they upload that receipt, they have to tag it to program supplies because they know that's like what they're spending their money for. And then they get to look at their account and they know how much is left. So they know not only what they charge, but they know how much is left in their budget, which is pretty cool, I think, from a nonprofit perspective. So those are the three platforms that, I've really liked and I have thought were really interesting for nonprofits. If you wanted to move away from kind of like the paperless system. A few other just tips, and then we'll kind of wrap this topic up a little bit early, and I'd love to hear any of your questions. So go ahead and drop any questions that you might have in the Q&A section, and I can get to those, either if it's about expense processing or if it's something else. But a few other tips, credit cards are generally a nightmare for all accountants. I'm telling you that from my own experience, and we work with, like I said, over 100 nonprofits, and they're a nightmare for a reason. And I kind of alluded to it earlier. A lot of times I see nonprofits, they're afraid to give out credit cards to too many people because they think, I don't know what they think is going to happen, right? Somebody's going to commit fraud, or they're going to use the card wrong, or whatever. The biggest issue that I have found with credit cards is when you have one or two credit cards and you circulate that across the agency, and then me, the accountant, goes and says, okay, which charges do I have credit cards for? It happens every single month whenever I just even worked for one nonprofit, that there were several transactions that nobody knew what the charges were for. To me, that's less control than saying, you have 4 different credit cards and each person that needs a credit card has a credit card, and you can easily identify who the problem child is, who's the one that's not uploading their receipts or giving me the information, right? I can pinpoint that really easily. So my tip to you is to give the appropriate people a credit cards, and don't be shy about that, because your bank should be able to easily reduce their credit or manage their credit limits, and can go up or down depending on seasonal fluctuations or whatever. And you can easily shut it down. So if you're managing things, kind of skipping down to the bottom, I look at credit card transactions generally on a weekly basis. And if your accountant flags anything that's suspicious, you could always temporarily disable the card or revoke the card or whatever. So I'm all in favor of having more people have credit cards so that your accountants can really pinpoint who the problem is. Next, train your team on their budgets. It's also a nightmare because credit cards, you're getting all these receipts. You have no idea what these are for. You have no idea which grant they're for. You have no idea which department they're for. And if you're a more complex organization, tracking your expenses by your grant, by your department, by your accounts are really important. And I know I used to work in an organization that at that time had 85 employees, and we had so many credit card charges. And we had, I think, 4 different departments. But in addition to the 4 different departments, we had, I can't even tell you, we had 14 government contracts. I don't even know how many private foundation grants that I needed to keep track of. I couldn't even tell you. So for me then to have to go hunt down the detailed information as to, okay, what grant is this for? Or what, is this for a specific camp? Because I know this particular funder pays this camp or whatever it is, I had to go hunt down that information. So it just really bogged down the account with that level of detail. So train your team on their budgets, let them understand like which accounts should they be spending, how much should they be spending on an annual basis, make them manage those budgets, make them identify on their receipts, what are these expenses? What are they for? And what account is it going to? So that hopefully your accountant is preparing department reports, if that's appropriate. And your department heads that have these credit cards can determine that charge seems reasonable. That's what I would expect. Or sometimes if there's a coding error, meaning your accountant, had a data entry issue, they could identify those problems and fix them and kind of serve as a second set of eyes on your accountant. So I'm all in favor of getting as many people on your team informed, knowledgeable, understanding what their budget is, being accountable for their budget, tracking their expenses, and managing their own receipts. And really the only way to do that is to get them a credit card or have a really robust employee expense reimbursement process. Or like I said, consider something like Divi, where you can really manage their budget and you can really manage kind of their user activity. So that's what I have. I'm going to open it up to questions. If anybody has any specific questions about any of these platforms or the processes in general or issues we've seen in audits or anything like that, let me know. But while I'm still sharing my screen, because I'll turn it off here in a little bit, I'm going to do another shameless plug. I do this every week, or every other week rather, when we're on these calls. I've put so much of these FAQs, like trainings, free trainings, into this Charity CFO University. Check that out, the Charity CFO University. There's 2 hours of free training, crash course in nonprofit accounting. Share it with others, share it with people you know. Totally no commitments there. There is some expanded course, really low price point, $29. But if you need to, okay, now that I have the foundation, I actually need to learn how to do some of this stuff. I need to do it myself. I've actually walked you through how to do that as well. And then last, of course, if you have any questions that come up even after, always feel free to reach out. You can follow us on any social media platform. You can find me on LinkedIn, visit our website, schedule some time to chat with me if you have other questions about your accounting or how we might be able to help you with your accounting. I'm happy to go over that. So that is basically it in a nutshell. There's a lot we could probably go over, but probably nothing that we need to exhaust today because there's so many different variables, so many different options. Anybody have any questions? If not, we can go ahead and wrap up this conversation early. We're going to be doing another, we do these webinars usually every other week on totally different topics. So if you have other topics that you'd like to go over, feel free to shoot me an email, send me a message on Slack, or not Slack, LinkedIn, or shoot it in here. And I'm happy to answer those questions. All right. Well, if any of you all, like I said, have any future topics you want us to go over, pain points in your business that you're really struggling with, feel free to shoot me a message, email me, our Facebook group as well. If you haven't, just search for A Modern Nonprofit in Facebook, and you can join our Facebook group, and you can always drop your questions there. I personally moderated along with my business partner. He's on vacation today, Tim Hudson, so he also moderates that group. And we're happy to answer any questions you have. Best of luck to everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you all in a couple weeks. Hopefully you found this good. Bye.